Good morning. Monday again. Off to work. Time for another chat. Excuse the parking sensors there. Narrow drive. Yeah, today I thought I'd talk about one that I've been asked for a lot. I don't just mean by people on YouTube, because that hasn't actually happened, but I mean people in general. My gaming group, my younger brother, different people over the years have asked me about my origin in D&D, where I started, my first gaming group. And interestingly enough, those are two completely different things. My first introduction to D&D, many apologies, I am still fighting a cold. My first introduction to D&D, I was no more than 8 or 9 years old. I have a cousin who was a couple years older than me, and he had encountered it through, I believe, through his dad. And he started telling me about it, and we played. It wasn't, today I probably wouldn't even call it D&D, but for a 9-year-old, it was D&D. We had some figures on a board, some names, and we made some rolls and killed some goblins. It was very basic, but it was enough. It gave me the idea of the game. And at that point, I was hooked. I loved the idea of it. I loved the process of making up a game as you go. And then he also introduced me to the books. And I don't mean just the game books. I mean, this is back at the point where the D&D novels were actually a big thing. Or were becoming a big thing. I didn't realize how big they would get at the time. The Dragonlance Chronicles, which I've mentioned before, was out. We were only a little ways off Icewind Dale when all of that started, and the now infamous Drizzt Do'Urden. But I started to read. Now, my cousin, he had only been down for summer break, so he went back to school where he lived, and that was really the end of us playing D&D. And then from about 9 to 13, I didn't actually have a gaming group. What I did have, though, was by then every book that was out, and I had started memorizing all of the rules and reading through them over and over, just because I didn't have a group, so I would imagine what a game would be like if I had a group. So, imagining a game about imagining things. And as bizarre as it sounds, I think those years of not having a group and having to imagine what I felt like the game would be like were probably instrumental, because it made me really contemplate in depth. It gave me that chance to really think and to imagine what the world would look like. And it made me flesh things out in my own mind because, well, I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have a group to actually play a game with. And then I hit high school. In high school, there was a after-school club. There were some guys. We stumbled around in D&D. It was mainly hack and slash. None of it was all that great. None of us knew anything. I mean, I knew the rules, but I didn't know how to interact with people, or I wasn't confident enough to join the club and then immediately tell them that I knew the rules better than they did. So it was awkward. It was forced. We weren't a group of friends. We were a group of people that happened to go to the same school that all knew what D&D was. And again, I think we learn a lot by negative experience. You know, that group showed me a lot of what to look for that I don't want to see in players. People that are there for one reason that isn't necessarily the same reason I'm there for. But, you know, that continued for a couple years. And then fate finally stepped in. I got a new job while I was still in high school at an inventory control company. Basically, we would meet up at the office, get in a company van, they would drive us to some store somewhere, we would take a stock of what they had, and then we would drive back. Now, because of the travel time involved, you know, we might be driving 45 minutes to get to a store, I decided, what the hell, I'm going to bring a book with me. And I brought one of my Dungeons & Dragons books to read. I didn't know any of the people that I worked with yet. This was my first or second store. And one of the other girls that worked there saw what I was reading, and we started talking about it. She was a bit older than me, but she knew what D&D was, which was unheard of. I got to know her a bit better, and it turned out at the time that I had a car, she didn't, and she ended up needing a ride home one day. Except she wasn't going home, she was asking me to drop her off at her gaming group. And I got invited along. At the time, they weren't playing D&D. They were playing a game called Changeling. It's one of the World of Darkness system games. I had never heard of it. Didn't know it existed until that day. But it was a gaming group. She asked if I wanted to come. I said sure. I ended up rolling up a troll. I took the amnesia flaw because I figured that was a good excuse why I didn't understand what was going on. The game itself wasn't memorable, except for the fact that I will remember that character just because it was the first one. The game lasted about 3 sessions. I think it was a Thursday night, a Friday night, and a Saturday night. And at some point in the Saturday night, someone said, you know, it's really not working. And whenever I first heard that, I was crushed because I'm thinking, okay, there it is, the game's done. You know, I'll go back to not having anything again. I was very naive at the time. And immediately they put down the books and says, okay, well, what do we want to play instead then? And someone else in the group popped up and says, well, I've got a D&D game, I can run that. And within 10 minutes, we were rolling up new characters in a D&D game. And I ended up spending the next 7-8 years with that group. And when I say spending the next 7 or 8 years with them, I do mean that 3, 4, 5 nights a week after work, I would call up one of the guys and say, hey, what's going on? And they'd say, oh yeah, we've got a game running tonight, come on over. Or I'd ring up and they'd say, oh, well, I don't know if anybody's doing anything. And I'd say, well, I'll do something. And we used to play, at one point we were playing 5 days out of 7. And our weekend consisted of Friday night after work, we go out for a bit of food. We talk about D&D while we're eating. Then we go back to someone's house, get there about 7, play till midnight, break off, meet for breakfast Saturday morning, talk about what we did in last night's game, go to someone's house, start playing again, order pizza for lunch, play straight through, stop, go out to dinner on Saturday night, come back in, keep playing till 2 or 3 in the morning, often crash at that person's house to get up Sunday morning, go have breakfast, continue playing after that, and then finish about 5 or 6 that night, so we were all ready for work Monday morning. So I'm talking about possibly 14, 15, 16 hours a day, Saturday and Sunday, and evenings through the week as well. We were gaming a lot for about 7 years. I've mentioned Matt Koval before. He did a great video on a West Marches style game. I had never heard of the term until he said it, but I realized when he said it, that's what we used to do. If people couldn't show up on a certain night, they didn't show up on a certain night. We went somewhere with somebody else. If somebody didn't have an idea for what to run, we'd get somebody else to run. The group just drove games. And not just in D&D either. D&D, World of Darkness, GURPS, Rifts, Battletech, Marvel Heroes, Cthulhu, Paranoia, and probably a dozen other game systems that I don't even... Dangerous Journeys, an amazing system that never really went anywhere. We played, we gamed, and that group set a lot of my conceptions as a young person on life, and I had a very different viewpoint because of that. Now, this group, I've mentioned that I was 16, 17, I was young. I had just started working, just got my license, yes, somewhere around there. You know, the girl that I met at work, she was 22, 23. We also had a guy in the group that was in his 30s and was ex-military. You know, we had another guy that was in his 30s that worked offshore. There was another guy there that was in his, it must have been his early 50s at the time, that was a biochemist or something crazy. He made more money than the rest of us put together, but D&D was what he loved. You know, he'd been playing it probably since the beginning. And there were others that came and went and joined and left, and but there was a group of 4 or 5 of us that stayed, and we were from all different types of lives, all different age ranges, all different backgrounds, all different histories, and it opened my eyes a lot to not seeing the world as being as limited as a lot of the people I went to school with. You know, I tried to explain to people that I went to school with about D&D and about the gaming group, and you know, they'd look at me and say, "You're hanging out with a bunch of old people." Well, maybe I was. I've always considered myself old for my age. I'm one of those few people that looks forward to being an old man because, well, most people, if an old man says something, just says, "Oh, he's a crazy old man," and moves on. I can say what I want then. Saying what I want is a big thing for me. I do it now, but nowadays people argue with me. I'm looking forward to when they stop. So yeah, that's my origin with D&D. I ended up moving out of my parents' house and into a spare room that one of the guys in the gaming group had going. From there, I moved around a few different places, did a few different things, but that group became the people that were there for me. When I did something stupid and my parents kicked me out, they offered me a couch. When I did something stupid and just walked out before they kicked me out, they offered me a couch. When I had problems, they were the ones I talked to. We dealt with so many things, in-game and out, that it was just incredibly special. And to this day, even though I'm living in a different country and I rarely speak to any of them, a week does not go by that I don't think of these people. These friends that even today, if I see them, and every once in a while whenever I go back to Louisiana, I do see them, and we'll go out for a meal or we'll play a game. But it's one of those relationships where you don't see them for 5 years, but then within 10 minutes of being back together, you realize nothing has changed. They're still that close friend, and they always will be. So that's my D&D origin story. That's where I came from. Yeah, I'll call it a day there. Game tonight, so I might end up talking about some of that tomorrow. Until then, try to have a good Monday, and I'll see you on Tuesday.